They handed me a tray before they handed me a chair. I still remember the way the silver spoon slipped from my fingers when I saw my name, not on a gold embossed card near the stage, not beside the family, not even among distant cousins, but printed in small, in different letters on a folded card that read staff table. For a moment, I thought it was a mistake. Then I saw them laughing. And that was the exact second something inside me stopped being human. The hall glittered like a palace built for royalty. Crystal chandeliers hung low, scattering warm light over silk dresses and tailored tuxedos. A live orchestra played softly in the corner, and the scent of expensive perfume floated through the air like a silent reminder that this world did not belong to people like me. But it did. At least, it was supposed to. I had once stood at the center of her world. Emily's laughter used to echo in my tiny apartment, when neither of us had enough money for proper furniture. We ate instant noodles sitting on the floor. She promised me she didn't care about wealth, about status, about last names. "I just want you," she used to whisper. Now she was wearing a diamond necklace that probably cost more than my entire life, and I was holding a tray. "Excuse me," one of the event coordinators said coldly. "Staff enters from the back." Staff, I looked around, searching for someone who might say this was a misunderstanding. Her eyes met mine for half a second, and she looked away. No confusion, no apology, no shame, just calculation. I walked to the corner of the hall where round tables were covered in plain white cloth instead of embroidered gold. A few actual servers were sitting there, confused by my tuxedo. "You knew," one of them asked. I forced a small smile. "You could say that." My phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. I ignored it. The master of ceremonies tapped the microphone and the room slowly quieted. "Ladies and gentlemen, before dinner is served, we have a few words from someone very special, the CEO of Valiant Enterprises." A murmur passed through the guests. Valiant Enterprises wasn't just a company. It was a financial empire, a name that moved markets, a name that crushed competitors without leaving fingerprints. The CEO rarely appeared in public. I finally answered the call. "Are you inside?" A calm voice asked. "Yes." "Good. Stay where you are." I looked toward the stage as a tall man in his late 50s walked up to the microphone. His suit was simple, but everything about him screamed authority. The kind that didn't need to shout. He scanned the room slowly. His gaze passed over the VIP tables, over the bride and groom, over the investors, and then it stopped on me. My heart didn't race. It didn't need to. I had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in my head. The CEO adjusted the microphone. "I was not originally scheduled to speak tonight," he began, his voice deep and steady. "But I recently discovered something interesting." Emily stiffened beside her new husband, Daniel, heir to a real estate dynasty and the man who had publicly humiliated me 2 months ago in front of her entire family. "You see," the CEO continued, "I value loyalty, and I despise betrayal." A subtle silence spread across the hall. Daniel leaned back in his chair, confident, smug. He had no idea. The CEO pulled out a small envelope from his pocket. 3 years ago, Valiant Enterprises faced bankruptcy. We were infiltrated, data leaks, financial sabotage, internal corruption. A few board members shifted uncomfortably. "What saved this company," he said slowly, "was a junior analyst who uncovered the entire operation." My phone buzzed again. A message appeared on the screen. "Ready?" I typed back on one word. "Always." The CEO's eyes never left mine. "That analyst," he continued, "was offered a partnership. But instead of taking public credit, he chose to remain silent, to build quietly, to prepare." The air felt heavier now. Daniel frowned. Emily's fingers tightened around her bouquet. "And tonight," the CEO said, "that same man sits among the staff." A collective gasp swept through the hall. My table went completely still. I stood up slowly. Every step toward the stage felt like a memory burning behind my eyes. The nights Emily cried about bills, the morning Daniel accidentally leaked a rumor that cost me my job, the investors who laughed when I tried to pitch my model, the emails I traced back to a single IP address. Daniel's, he didn't just steal my girlfriend. He stole my research. He stole my prototype. He stole my future. But he underestimated one thing. I never stopped building. The CEO stepped aside as I approached the microphone. "You look surprised," I said calmly, staring directly at Daniel. His face had drained of color. "This is impossible." He whispered. "No," I replied softly. "This is accounting." A screen behind the stage flickered on. Financial records appeared. Transactions, shell companies, transfers from Daniel's firm to offshore accounts. Gaps turned into whispers. "I spent the last 2 years buying shares in silence," I continued. "Not in my name, not publicly, quietly, patiently." Emily's voice trembled. "What are you doing?" I didn't look at her. "Daniel's company," I said, "merged with Valiant Enterprises last quarter." Daniel shook his head. "That merger was finalized." "Yes," I interrupted. "After I became the majority shareholder." Silence, pure, suffocating silence. "I let you humiliate me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I let you believe I was finished. I needed you confident, careless." Daniel tried to stand, but security had already moved closer. "You forged signatures," I continued. "You manipulated projections. You committed corporate fraud on a scale that will interest more than just this room." Police sirens echoed faintly in the distance. Emily's eyes filled with tears. "You said you loved me." "I did?" I answered honestly. That's why I didn't destroy him sooner. The doors at the back of the hall opened. Officers stepped inside. Daniel's hands trembled. You planned this, the wedding? I leaned closer to the microphone. I needed everyone here, I said quietly. Witnesses, the CEO nodded slightly behind me. This isn't revenge, I said, staring into Daniel's eyes. This is balance. The officers reached the stage. Emily grabbed my arm. Please don't do this. For the first time that night, I looked at her fully, and I saw it, not love, not regret, fear. I gently removed her hand from my sleeve. The lead officer stepped forward. Daniel Reeves. Daniel's breathing became shallow. The entire hall held its breath. And just as the officer opened his mouth to speak, the lights went out. Darkness swallowed the hall in a single breath. For half a second, there was silence, the kind of silence that feels alive, like something is watching you from inside it. Then the screaming started. Glasses shattered. Chairs scraped violently against marble floors. Someone knocked into me as the orchestra's music died mid-note. Emergency lights flickered dim red across the ceiling, painting every face in panic. Stay calm, one of the officers shouted. But panic does not listen to instructions. I didn't move. I knew this wasn't random. A backup generator should have activated within seconds. It didn't. Instead, the giant LED screen behind the stage flickered back to life, not with financial records, not with company data, but with a live video feed. My office, the private vault room, the room that only 3 people had access to. The camera zoomed in slowly. The safe door was open. Empty, a low murmur rolled through the guests like distant thunder, and then a voice echoed through the speakers. Well played, it said calmly, but you forgot one rule. I knew that voice. I hadn't heard it in years. Marcus Vaillant, the founder, the man who was supposed to be retired, the man who was supposed to be in Switzerland recovering from a stroke. The CEO behind me stiffened. That's impossible, he whispered. On the screen, Marcus stepped into frame, his silver hair perfectly combed, his expression almost amused. You built your empire quietly, Marcus said, looking directly into the camera as if he could see me. But you built it inside my house. The guests stared at me now, confusion replacing fear. What is this? Emily whispered somewhere in the darkness. Marcus smiled slightly. You see, he continued, while you were busy buying shares, I was watching who was buying them. A cold sensation spread through my chest. No, that couldn't be. You're intelligent, Marcus said, patient. Strategic, I admired that. Truly. That's why I allowed it. Allowed. The word felt heavier than any insult Daniel had ever thrown at me. You thought you were becoming majority shareholder. Marcus continued. But every shell company you used, every proxy investor was traced. The screen split into multiple panels. My transactions, my offshore accounts, my hidden agreements, every move I made in the past 2 years, displayed publicly. My heartbeat slowed, not from fear, but from calculation. He wouldn't expose this unless. Tonight, Marcus said calmly, you plan to destroy Daniel. Daniel looked up at the screen, confused. Wait, what? But Daniel? Marcus continued, his irrelevant. The officers froze. Security guards looked unsure of who they were protecting anymore. You see, Marcus said, Daniel works for me. The words hit harder than the blackout. Daniel's pale face shifted, not into shock, but into something else. Relief, he slowly straightened his posture. I told you? Daniel muttered under his breath, almost smiling. The room tilted for a moment. No, that would mean. The data leaked 3 years ago. Marcus said, a test. The CEO behind me staggered backward. You orchestrated that. I needed to see who would rise. Marcus replied, who would think beyond survival? My mind raced. The sabotage, the bankruptcy scare, the opportunity I used to climb. You weren't saving the company. Marcus said, you were auditioning. The screen changed again. Clips of me working late nights, security footage, boardroom recordings, even private calls. You passed, Marcus said, brilliantly. Silence filled the hall once more, but this time it wasn't panic. It was anticipation. Tonight was never about Daniel, Marcus continued. And it was never about Emily. Emily's breath caught sharply. This wedding, Marcus said softly, was a stage. A chill crawled up my spine. For you. The emergency lights brightened slightly. Marcus leaned closer to the camera. I wanted to see if revenge would control you or if you would control revenge. My jaw tightened. And I asked, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. Marcus's smile widened almost imperceptibly. You chose spectacle, he said. Public humiliation. Arrests collapse. He paused. Predictable. A low murmur swept through the investors. You built everything on anger, Marcus continued, which means you are controllable. I stepped closer to the screen. If you traced every move, I said quietly, then you know something else too? Marcus tilted his head slightly. Oh, I never trusted Daniel enough to make him the final target. Daniel's faint smile faltered. The guests exchanged uneasy glances. The CEO slowly looked at me. What did you do? I didn't break eye contact with the screen. Check the merger agreement, I said calmly. Marcus's expression didn't change, but behind him someone off camera moved quickly. The emergency clause, I continued. Page 73, Daniel's breathing grew uneven again. There is no emergency clause, he said sharply. I finally looked at him. You signed it without reading, I said softly. On the screen, Marcus turned slightly as someone handed him a tablet. He scanned it. For the first time, his smile faded. That clause, I continued, transfers controlling interest to a third-party trust if evidence of executive manipulation is proven. The hall was so quiet that the faint hum of the generators could be heard. And who controls that trust? Marcus asked slowly. I inhaled once. Not me. A beat of silence. Your daughter? The room erupted into confused whispers. Marcus's eyes hardened. My daughter has no involvement in this company. She does now, I replied. The screen flickered again. Another live feed appeared. A private office. A woman sitting at a desk, elegant, composed, early 30s. Sophia Valian, Marcus's estranged daughter. The one he publicly disowned years ago after she criticized his corporate ethics. She looked directly into the camera. Father? She said calmly, you always taught me to think 10 steps ahead. Marcus's jaw tightened. You tried to control every outcome. Sophia continued. But you never considered that someone might approach me first. The guests stared between the stage and the screen, trying to understand who truly held power now. I didn't need majority shares, I said quietly. I needed leverage. Daniel stumbled back a step. You used me, he breathed. Yes, I replied without hesitation. Emily stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. Why, she whispered. I finally answered her. Because love without respect is just manipulation. On the screen, Sophia signed a document. Digital confirmation flashed across the display. Control transferred. Marcus's breathing grew visibly heavier. You think this is victory? He asked me, his voice no longer calm. No, I said softly. This is evolution. Police sirens outside grew louder again. This time, they weren't stopping. Marcus straightened. You may have outmaneuvered me tonight, he said coldly, but you've declared war. I stepped even closer to the microphone. I declared war the day you turned my life into an experiment. The hall doors burst open once more, but this time it wasn't just police. It was federal investigators. Marcus's eyes flickered just for a second, and in that second, I realized something. He still wasn't afraid. Which meant there was one more move left on the board. The screen suddenly glitched. Sophia's video feed froze. The confirmation document disappeared, and Marcus slowly began to smile again. You're good, he said quietly, but you're still learning. Behind me, the CEO gasped as his phone vibrated violently. I felt mine buzz at the same time. A single notification lit up the screen, trust revoked, transfer nullified. I looked up at Marcus. His eyes gleamed with something far more dangerous than anger. Approval. And that was the moment I understood. This game was never about destroying Daniel. It was never about reclaiming love. It was never even about power. It was about succession. And I had just stepped into the final test. The investigators moved toward the stage. The guests held their breath. Marcus leaned into the camera one last time and said softly, "Now show me how far you're willing to go." The words didn't echo, they settled, heavy, intentional, final. Now show me how far you're willing to go. The investigators paused mid-step, as if unsure who they were supposed to arrest anymore. The officers looked at Marcus on the screen, then at me, then at Daniel, the puppet who didn't even realize his strings were visible. Marcus wasn't defending himself, he was provoking me. I lowered my phone slowly. You want escalation? I said calmly. Marcus folded his hands behind his back. I want clarity. The hall felt less like a wedding and more like a courtroom without a judge. Sophia's frozen image flickered back to life for a split second, just long enough for me to see something in her expression. Not panic. Not defeat, a signal. My phone vibrated again. Encrypted message. Phase 3? Good, I exhaled slowly. You revoked the trust, I said. Impressive speed. Marcus gave a slight nod. I taught you efficiency. Yes, I replied quietly. You did? Daniel looked between us like a man realizing he had never been in control of anything in his life. What is happening? He snapped. Who is actually in charge here? Neither of us answered him. Because he didn't matter, the investigator's lead agent stepped forward. Miss Street. Valian, we have a warrant regarding financial irregularities. Marcus didn't even glance at him. You'll find nothing actionable? The agent hesitated. Of course he would. Because the warrant wasn't for Marcus. It was for the board. And they were already checking their phones. Gas rippled through the VIP tables. What is this? One investor muttered. Another stood abruptly. This says our emergency shares have been diluted. The CEO turned toward me slowly. What did you do? I finally faced the room fully. I stopped playing defense. Marcus's smile thinned. You couldn't get majority control. I continued. So you revoked the trust? Yes, sir. But the trust was never meant to hold power. A beat of silence. It was bait. The word landed softly, but it changed the air in the room. Marcus didn't react, but his eyes sharpened. I knew you'd monitor every transfer, I said. Every share. Every proxy. I stepped down from the stage slowly. So I created something you wouldn't monitor. The giant screen behind Marcus split again, this time showing a live financial ticker. Valiant Enterprises stock. Plummeting. Not crashing, bleeding. Controlled. Deliberate. What is this? The CEO whispered. A vote of no confidence? I replied. Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. You think manipulating stock price hurts me? He asked calmly. No, I said, but it hurts perception. Phones across the hall buzzed nonstop. Breaking news alerts. Market volatility. Regulatory review announcements. 3 hours ago, I continued, an anonymous report was filed with international regulators regarding internal experimental practices conducted under your leadership. A murmur spread again. Experimental practices, someone whispered. Marcus finally turned his head slightly, just enough to acknowledge that this wasn't random. You tested loyalty, I said quietly. You engineered corporate collapse to study behavioral responses. Silence. That's not illegal, Marcus said. No, I agreed. But hiding it from shareholders is. The investigators looked at one another. The lead agent's phone buzzed. He answered quietly. His posture changed. Marcus noticed. Of course he did. You're gambling, Marcus said calmly. If those reports fail scrutiny, you're finished. I met his eyes through the screen. They won't fail. A new video feed appeared. Boardroom footage from 3 years ago. Marcus speaking privately to Daniel. Pressure creates diamonds. Marcus had said in the recording. If the company collapses, we rebuild stronger. If someone rises from the ashes, we invest in them. The audio was clear, unedited, undeniable. The room erupted into chaos. You recorded me? Marcus asked softly. You recorded me first. I replied. Daniel staggered backward. You said that meeting was confidential. It was? Marcus answered coldly. I tilted my head slightly. Nothing is confidential when you underestimate the intern managing server backups. Marcus stared at me, and this time he looked proud. You anticipated surveillance, he said. Yes, and you let yourself be humiliated tonight. Yes, to provoke me? Yes. The investigators stepped forward decisively now. Mr. Valian, we need you to come with us. Marcus didn't move. Instead, he looked directly at me. You understand what happens next. It wasn't a question. The stock continued to drop. Investors were panicking. Board members were already calculating their exits. This company survives because I am its spine, Marcus said calmly. Remove me. And it collapses. He wasn't bluffing. Valiant Enterprises wasn't just structured around him. It depended on him. I knew that. Which is why this was never about removal. It was about transition. You're right, I said quietly. The investigators paused again. Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly. You are the spine. I continued. But even spines age. The screen shifted once more. Sophia appeared again, but this time not in her private office. She was in the building's secondary boardroom, surrounded by shareholders. Minority shareholders. The quiet ones, the overlooked ones. Emergency session has been called. Sophia said calmly into the camera. By collective vote, Marcus's silence deepened. You can't convene without majority. I don't need majority. Sophia interrupted. I need momentum. Behind her, hands were raised. Votes were being counted. Digital confirmations flashing. Temporary suspension of executive authority pending investigation. Marcus's power wasn't erased, but it was paused, strategically, cleanly. The lead investigator stepped closer. This is now a federal matter. Marcus finally moved, not resisting, not arguing, just stepping forward. But before the agents could escort him fully, he raised one hand slightly. Wait. They hesitated. He kept his eyes on me. You could have destroyed me completely tonight. Yes, but you didn't. No. Why? The entire hall seemed to lean in for my answer, because this was the real test. Revenge would have been destruction. Evolution required restraint. Because, I said quietly, I don't want your empire. A flicker of surprise crossed his face. I want something you never built. And what is that? I stepped closer to the camera. Legacy without fear. Silence. Pure. Unfiltered. Marcus studied me like a craftsman evaluating finished work. Finally, slowly, he nodded. Then earn it. The investigators escorted him toward the exit. No Schrödinger. Just controlled surrender. Daniel collapsed into his chair. Emily stood frozen, tears streaking silently down her face. The investors whispered in disbelief. The orchestra sat motionless, and I stood in the center of it all, not victorious, not relieved, but aware. This wasn't the end of a war. It was the beginning of leadership. Sophia's image remained on the screen. She looked at me carefully. This isn't over, she said softly. I know, I replied. Are you ready for what comes next? I looked around the hall, at the broken illusion, at the fallen arrogance, at the system shifting beneath our feet, and then I looked back at her. Yes, I said calmly, but deep down I knew something else. Marcus Valian had never been testing my intelligence, he had been testing my limits. And tonight, I had just proven I was willing to rewrite the rules. The wedding hall never recovered its music. Guests left in fragments, whispers, heels clicking against marble, shattered conversations trailing into the night. The chandelier still glowed, but the illusion was gone. What remained wasn't romance or celebration, it was consequence. Sophia arrived before midnight. She walked into the hall not as a daughter, not as a rebel, but as something far more dangerous, calm authority. Her presence didn't demand attention, it absorbed it. Daniel was gone by then, escorted quietly through a side exit. Emily hadn't moved from her chair. I stood near the stage, watching the last of the media vans pull away. You didn't destroy him, Sophia said behind me. I didn't turn. I didn't need to. You destabilized the board, exposed my father, triggered federal oversight, and redirected shareholder power in under 3 hours. Now I faced her. That was the plan. She studied me carefully. Most men in your position would have burned everything. I was tempted. And I thought about the moment the lights went out, the humiliation, the rage, the years of silent rebuilding, the obsession. I realized something, I said quietly. If I destroyed him completely, I would become him. Sophia's expression softened slightly, not emotionally, but strategically. He built the company on fear, she said. Yes, and what will you build it on? Accountability. A faint smile touched her lips. Investors don't invest in morality. They invest in stability, I corrected, and fear is unstable. She walked past me, glancing at the shattered centerpiece on the floor. My father will not stay down for long. I don't expect him to. Then why provoke him publicly? I stepped closer to the empty stage, looking at the microphone that had changed everything. Because power that hides grows myth. Power that is exposed becomes human. She considered that. You didn't answer my earlier question, she said finally. Why involve me? I met her gaze directly. Because you were the only variable he never controlled. Silence. Outside, distant thunder rolled across the city skyline. You studied him, she said, for 3 years? And you think you understand him? No, I replied honestly. I understand patterns. She crossed her arms. And what pattern did you see? That he tests loyalty until it breaks. That he values intelligence over obedience, and that he never truly wanted an heir. Her eyes sharpened. Wanted a mirror, I continued. Someone ruthless enough to carry his methods forward. And you. I refused to be that. The doors at the far end of the hall opened again. Federal agents walked past without looking at us. Marcus was being processed, interrogated, temporarily restrained, but not defeated. Sophia exhaled slowly. He will try to reclaim control. Wes? Possibly. And if he does, I looked toward the city lights beyond the glass walls. Then I'll step aside. That answer surprised her. You fought this hard just to surrender. I fought to change the direction, I said. Not to own the throne. For the first time, she looked at me not as an ally or opponent, but as something uncertain. What do you actually want? She asked. I didn't hesitate. To build something that doesn't require humiliation to function. Behind us, soft footsteps approached. Emily, her makeup was smudged, her wedding dress no longer glowing, just fabric and regret. Was any of it real? She asked quietly. I turned to her fully. Yes. Her lips trembled. Then why punish me like this? I didn't, I said gently. You chose your side long ago. Tears slipped down her face. I was scared. I know. Of being poor again. Of struggling. Of uncertainty. I know. She searched my face desperately. Do you hate me? I took a slow breath. No. That hurt her more than anger would have. Then what do you feel? I thought carefully. Gratitude. She looked confused. Your betrayal forced me to grow beyond comfort, I said. Without it, I would have stayed small. Silence stretched between us. You don't love me anymore, she whispered. No, it wasn't cruel. It was honest. She nodded slowly, accepting what was already obvious. Then she walked away. No dramatic collapse. No screaming. Just the quiet exit of someone who realized they misjudged the future. Sophia watched you and I expected. I'm calmer than I used to be. She stepped closer. The board will call for interim leadership by morning. I know. They'll suggest you. Probably. And I'll decline. Her eyes widened slightly. Why? Because revolutions led by revenge don't last. Thunder cracked louder now. Rain began tapping against the glass walls. You exposed my father, she said slowly. Shifted control. Protected the company from collapse. And now you want to walk away. I want to stay, I corrected. Just not at the top. She studied me carefully. Then where? I looked back at the empty hall. At the foundation. The word hung between us. You want to rebuild culture, she realized. Yes, she nodded slowly. That's harder than overthrowing a king. I know. A faint smile crossed her face. Good. We stood there for a long moment, watching the storm roll across the city. The empire wasn't destroyed, it was unsettled. And that was enough. My phone buzzed. A message from the lead investigator. Marcus is cooperating. Interesting. Sophia noticed the shift in my expression. What? He's not resisting. She didn't look surprised. He wouldn't. Why? Because he got what he wanted. I understood instantly. Proof. He had pushed me to the edge. Watch whether I would destroy everything or redirect it. And I chose redirection, which meant I had passed, not as a mirror, but as a successor of a different kind. The rain intensified. Sophia extended her hand. Partners, she asked. I looked at it, then at her. This isn't revenge anymore, I said quietly. No, she agreed. It's responsibility. I took her hand. Partners. Outside, sirens faded into the distance. Inside, the lights finally dimmed. The wedding that was meant to humiliate me had ended an era instead. Not with blood, not with collapse, but with exposure. And as I walked out of that hall for the last time, I realized something that took years to understand. Revenge feels powerful, but control over revenge, that's legacy.